The sharp crack of a rifle shot echoed through the Montana foothills, sending a flock of startled birds into the air as Eleanor Zimmerman steadied her breathing and lowered her father's Winchester. The year was 1876, and at 24 years old, she had long since grown accustomed to the whispers that followed her through the small town of Pinewood Creek. Eleanor, Ellie to the few who truly knew her, had learned to ignore the sideways glances and hushed conversations that inevitably followed her path through town. "Fine shot," her father, Henry Zimmerman, remarked gruffly, watching as his farmhand retrieved the felled deer from the distance. "You always did have a better eye than your brothers." Ellie smiled thinly, running her fingers along the polished wood of the rifle. The compliment was rare, and she cherished it, even as the autumn wind whipped her chestnut hair around her face. "Thank you, Pa." The Zimmerman homestead sat on the outskirts of Pinewood Creek, a modest ranch that had weathered 2 decades of harsh Montana winters and scorching summers. The land had been good to them, providing enough to sustain the family after her mother's passing 10 years prior. With her older brothers married and moved to neighboring properties, it had fallen to Ellie to remain at home, caring for her aging father and helping manage what remained of their cattle business. "Best get that meat back before sundown," Henry said, already turning toward their wagon. "Town meeting tonight. Need to hear what they're planning about that railroad coming through." Ellie nodded, though her thoughts drifted elsewhere. The town meetings were always the same, the men discussing business and progress, while the women gathered in corners to exchange recipes and gossip. And invariably, someone would make a comment within her earshot about how she was still unwed, or such a shame she never found a husband. The truth was more complicated. After a brief courtship at 19 that had ended in humiliating rejection, Ellie had thrown herself into running the ranch. Her competence with firearms, cattle, and finances had become both her armor and her prison. As they loaded their kill onto the wagon, a distant plume of dust on the horizon caught her attention. Riders were approaching, unusual for this remote stretch of their property. "Pa," she said, gesturing toward the approaching figures. Henry squinted, his weathered face creasing with concern. "Get in the wagon, Ellie." She complied but kept the rifle across her lap as 4 riders approached. The lead horseman raised his hand in greeting as they drew near. "Afternoon, Zimmerman," called a familiar voice. It was Sheriff Thomas Burke, accompanied by his deputy and 2 men Ellie didn't recognize. "Found these gentlemen on the North Road, say they're looking for work." Henry stepped forward, appraising the strangers with a critical eye. "Cattle hands." The taller of the 2 strangers dismounted, removing his hat to reveal sun-bleached hair and clear blue eyes that immediately sought Ellie's. "Yes, sir. Name's Owen Miller. My partner here is Jack Dawson. We worked the Blackwater Ranch in Wyoming until they sold off last month." "Blackwater went under?" Henry asked, surprise evident in his voice. "Railroad bought them out," Owen explained, his voice carrying a slight Eastern accent that seemed at odds with his sun-darkened skin and calloused hands. "We've been riding west since, looking for honest work." Ellie watched him carefully. There was something different about this cowboy, a quiet intelligence behind his eyes that didn't match the typical ranch hands who occasionally passed through looking for seasonal employment. His clothing, while dusty from travel, was of good quality, and the way he carried himself spoke of education. "Well," Henry said thoughtfully, "I could use some help with the north pasture fence before winter sets in. Can't offer much, but there's room in the bunkhouse and 3 square meals." Owen's eyes flickered to Ellie again just briefly before returning to her father. "That's more than fair, Mr. Zimmerman. We're grateful." The sheriff tipped his hat. "I'll leave them in your capable hands then, Henry. See you at the meeting tonight." As the lawman rode away, Ellie caught Owen Miller studying her again, this time with undisguised curiosity at the rifle she still held confidently across her lap. She met his gaze directly, refusing to be the first to look away. "Your daughter?" Owen asked Henry. "Eleanor," her father confirmed. "Best shot in the county and runs our books better than the bank." Owen smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed his travel-weary face. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Zimmerman." "Likewise, Mr. Miller," she replied coolly, though something about his direct gaze made her pulse quicken in a way she hadn't felt in years. Henry gestured toward the wagon. "Town's that way. You can follow us in. After we deliver this meat to the butcher, I'll show you the bunkhouse." As they made their way toward Pinewood Creek, Ellie found herself acutely aware of Owen Miller riding behind them, his presence somehow filling the space around her despite the distance between them. It had been a long time since she'd noticed a man in such a way, and the sensation was as unwelcome as it was unexpected. Pinewood Creek bustled with unusual activity as they arrived, the impending railroad negotiations bringing an energy to the normally sedate town. Ellie helped her father deliver the venison to Mr. Abernathy's butcher shop, conscious of the new cowhand tying his horse at the post outside. "Miss Zimmerman," Owen said, falling into step beside her as she exited the shop, "your father mentioned you keep the ranch accounts." Ellie nodded stiffly. "I do. I'm impressed. Most ranchers I've known can barely read a contract, let alone manage their own finances." She regarded him suspiciously. "And what would you know about contracts, Mr. Miller? You're a ranch hand." A shadow passed across his features before he smiled again. "I've had a varied education, Miss Zimmerman. Life takes unexpected turns." Before she could respond, a shrill voice called from across the street. "Eleanor Zimmerman, is that you hiding behind that wagon?" Ellie suppressed a grimace as Margaret Thornton, the mayor's wife and self-appointed social director of Pinewood Creek, bustled toward them. "At 45, Mrs. Thornton had dedicated herself to ensuring every eligible young woman in the county found a suitable husband, a mission that had placed Ellie firmly in her sights for years. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Thornton," Ellie said politely. "My dear, we missed you at the sewing circle yesterday," the older woman chided, her eyes darting curiously to Owen. "And who might this be?" "Owen Miller, madam," he answered, tipping his hat. "Just hired on at the Zimmerman Ranch." Mrs. Thornton's eyes lit with sudden interest. "Well, how fortunate. Eleanor, you must bring Mr. Miller to the harvest dance next weekend. We have so many lovely young ladies in town who would be delighted to meet a new face." Ellie felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment, knowing exactly what the woman was implying, that Ellie herself was no longer counted among the lovely young ladies worth introducing. "Mr. Miller will be quite busy with ranch work, I imagine," she replied stiffly. Owen surprised her by speaking up. "Actually, I'd be honored to attend, Mrs. Thornton. Perhaps Miss Zimmerman would consider accompanying me since I don't know anyone else in town yet." Margaret's expression faltered momentarily before she recovered. "How thoughtful. Well, I must be going. The meeting preparations won't handle themselves." As the woman hurried away, Ellie turned to Owen with narrowed eyes. "That wasn't necessary." "What wasn't?" he asked innocently. "Pretending you'd want to escort me. Mrs. Thornton will have spread that story across town by sundown." Owen's expression grew serious. "I wasn't pretending, Miss Zimmerman, and I don't particularly care what Mrs. Thornton or anyone else thinks." Before she could formulate a response, her father called from the wagon. "Ellie, we need to get home before dark." The ride back to the ranch passed in silence, but Ellie felt Owen's gaze on her periodically, stirring something long dormant within her chest. She pushed the feeling away. Experience had taught her that hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. The following days established a routine. Owen and Jack proved to be excellent workers, repairing the north pasture fence with efficiency that even impressed Henry. Ellie kept her distance, focusing on preparing the ranch for winter and managing their dwindling finances. But despite her efforts to maintain distance, she found herself increasingly aware of Owen's presence, the way he handled the nervous new colt with gentle confidence, his thoughtful questions about the ranch's operations, and the quiet respect he showed her father. More disconcerting were the moments she caught him watching her with those perceptive blue eyes, as though he saw something in her that others had missed. 4 days after their arrival, Ellie was working in the small garden behind the house when Owen approached, carrying tools from the barn. "Your vegetables look healthy," he observed, stopping at the garden's edge. "They need to be. Winter's coming," she replied without looking up. "You're preparing for a hard one." Ellie sat back on her heels, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. "My mother always said to prepare for the worst and be grateful when it doesn't come," Owen smiled. "Sounds like wise advice." "It was," she said, returning to her work. "She died 10 years ago." "I'm sorry," he said simply, and something in his tone made her look up. There was no pity in his expression, only understanding. "I lost my parents young too." The shared loss hung between them, creating an unexpected connection that made Ellie uncomfortable with its intimacy. She changed the subject. "Your accent, it's not Western. Where are you from originally?" A careful expression crossed his face. "Boston, originally. My father was in shipping. That's a long way from Wyoming cattle country. Like I said, life takes unexpected turns." Owen shifted the tools in his arms. "Speaking of which, does your offer of escort to the harvest dance still stand?" Ellie stared at him in surprise. "I never offered." "Then I'm offering," he said with a small smile. "Would you accompany me to the dance, Miss Zimmerman?" "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Owen tilted his head slightly. "Because I'd like to know you better." Is that so difficult to believe? It was, actually. Men didn't pursue Eleanor Zimmerman, not anymore, not since the incident with Thomas Blackwood when she was 19. "Mr. Miller," she began carefully, "I'm not sure what you've heard about me." "Nothing," he interrupted. "And I'm not interested in town gossip. I'm interested in the woman who can outshoot most men, manages ranch accounts, and still finds time to grow the prettiest garden I've seen in Montana territory." His directness left her momentarily speechless. I'll think about it," she finally managed. "That's all I ask," he replied with a nod, continuing toward the barn. Ellie watched him go, her heart beating unnaturally fast. She told herself it was merely surprise at his request, not the first stirrings of something more dangerous like hope. The day of the harvest dance arrived with unexpected speed. Ellie had ultimately agreed to accompany Owen, telling herself it was merely to help him integrate into the community. Her father had seemed pleased at the development, though he'd hidden his reaction behind his usual gruff exterior. As twilight approached, she found herself doing something she hadn't done in years, examining her appearance critically in the small mirror of her bedroom. The blue dress she'd chosen was several seasons old, but still becoming, emphasizing the slender curve of her waist and complementing her eyes. She'd arranged her hair in a simple style that framed her face, adding only a small silver pendant that had belonged to her mother. A knock at the door downstairs startled her from her contemplation. Taking a deep breath, she descended the stairs to find Owen standing in the main room, engaged in conversation with her father. He'd clearly made an effort with his appearance. His clothes were clean and pressed, his usually unruly hair neatly combed. He turned as she entered, and the appreciation in his eyes made her cheeks warm. "Miss Zimmerman," he said softly, "you look beautiful." Henry cleared his throat. "You two best get going. Roads get dark early this time of year." The harvest dance was held in the town hall, a building that served as church, meeting space, and occasional courthouse for Pinewood Creek. As Owen helped her down from the wagon, Ellie became acutely aware of the curious glances directed their way. Eleanor Zimmerman with a gentleman escort was evidently worthy of substantial interest. "People are staring," she murmured as they approached the entrance. "Let them," Owen replied easily, offering his arm. "I'm escorting the most interesting woman in Montana. They should stare." Inside, the hall had been transformed with autumn decorations, dried cornstalks, pumpkins, and colorful leaves adorning every available surface. A small band played in the corner, and several couples were already dancing. Mrs. Thornton spotted them immediately, making her way through the crowd with determined efficiency. "Eleanor, Mr. Miller, how wonderful you could join us," she exclaimed, her eyes darting between them speculatively. "Mr. Miller, there are several young ladies who have been asking about our new arrival." Owen's hand settled gently at the small of Ellie's back. "Thank you, Mrs. Thornton, but I'm quite contentedly accompanied this evening." The older woman's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course." "Well, enjoy yourselves." As she bustled away, Ellie glanced at Owen with begrudging appreciation. "You handled that gracefully." "Years of practice deflecting well-meaning matchmakers," he replied with a wink. "Would you care to dance, Miss Zimmerman?" The evening passed in a surprising blur of enjoyment. Owen proved to be an excellent dancer, guiding her confidently through waltzes and reels. More surprising was his ability to converse with everyone from the grizzled old miners who frequented the saloon to the prim schoolteacher who rarely spoke to anyone. During a break in the music, they stepped outside for fresh air. The night was clear and cold, stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky. "Thank you," Ellie said after a comfortable silence. "This has been unexpectedly pleasant." Owen smiled. "High praise indeed." "I don't normally enjoy these gatherings," she admitted, "because of the gossip." He asked gently. Ellie stiffened slightly. "So you have heard, bits and pieces, nothing that changes my opinion of you." He turned to face her fully. "People talk, Miss Zimmerman. It rarely reflects the truth." The honesty in his expression emboldened her. "5 years ago, I was engaged to Thomas Blackwood. He was the banker's son, considered quite a catch." The memory still stung, but less sharply than it once had. "A week before the wedding, he ended it. Publicly, said he couldn't marry a woman who might never give him children." Understanding dawned in Owen's eyes. "Because of your mother," Ellie nodded. "She had difficulties. 3 miscarriages before my brothers, then me. The doctor told her not to have more children after I was born, said it ran in families sometimes." She looked away toward the distant mountains. "The town's been whispering about my barrenness ever since, even though no doctor has ever examined me." Owen was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "People can be cruel about things they don't understand." "It's fine," she said, straightening her shoulders. "I've built a good life. The ranch keeps me busy." "Is that enough?" he asked quietly. The question caught her off guard with its perceptiveness. Before she could answer, the door opened behind them as other couples spilled out into the night air, their moment of privacy broken. "Shall we return inside?" Owen offered his arm again, and Ellie took it, grateful for the distraction from questions she wasn't ready to answer. The weeks following the harvest dance brought change to the Zimmerman ranch. As winter settled over Montana with its characteristic brutality, Owen and Jack proved themselves invaluable. When Henry offered to keep them on permanently, both men accepted with evident gratitude. For Ellie, Owen's continued presence was both comforting and unsettling. Their friendship deepened through shared work and conversation, yet she maintained careful boundaries, unwilling to acknowledge the growing attraction between them. If Owen noticed her caution, he respected it, never pressing for more than she offered. December brought the heaviest snowfall in years, effectively isolating the ranch from town. On the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, disaster struck. Henry, checking cattle in the south pasture, was thrown from his horse when the animal stepped into a hidden hole beneath the snow. Jack found him an hour later, unconscious and already dangerously cold. Ellie watched in horror as Owen and Jack carried her father into the house, his normally robust form alarmingly still. "He's alive," Owen assured her, taking charge with calm efficiency. "But his leg is badly broken and he's suffering from the cold. We need to warm him gradually." Through that long night, they worked together to save Henry Zimmerman's life. Owen revealed medical knowledge that surprised Ellie, setting the broken leg with practiced hands and brewing herbal remedies for pain and fever. "Where did you learn all this?" she asked as dawn broke, her father finally sleeping peacefully. Owen's expression grew distant. "My father wanted me to be a doctor. I attended medical college for 2 years in Boston." What happened? He seemed to weigh his answer carefully. Family tragedy. My parents died in a fire. The shipping company was deeply in debt. I had to leave school. His eyes met hers. I came west to start over. The personal revelation created a new dimension to their relationship. As the days passed and Henry slowly recovered, Ellie found herself increasingly dependent on Owen's support, both practical and emotional. Together, they managed the ranch through the harshest weeks of winter, developing a partnership that transcended employer and employee. January brought a brief thaw, allowing the doctor to finally reach them from town. He confirmed what Owen had already determined: Henry would recover, but slowly. His riding days were likely over. "You saved my life," Henry told Owen one evening as they sat around the kitchen table. "Both of you did," he added, including his daughter with a rare display of affection. "We make a good team," Owen replied, his eyes meeting Ellie's across the table. The moment was interrupted by an urgent knocking at the door. Jack stood there, his expression grave. "Cattle broke through the ice at the North Creek. We're losing them." The next hours were a desperate battle against time and freezing water as they fought to save the stranded animals. Owen worked tirelessly alongside Ellie, his strength and determination matching her own. When the last cow was pulled to safety, they stood together in the fading light, soaked and exhausted but successful. "We should get back," Ellie said, shivering despite her heavy coat. "You'll catch your death out here." Owen nodded, but as they turned to leave, his boot caught on hidden ice. He stumbled forward, crashing into Ellie and sending them both tumbling into a snowdrift. For a moment they lay tangled together, their faces inches apart. "I'm sorry," he whispered, but made no move to rise. Ellie felt the solid weight of him above her, saw the intensity in his eyes, and made a decision. She lifted her head slightly, closing the distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, a question asked and answered in the meeting of lips. Then it deepened, years of Ellie's carefully constructed walls crumbling under the tender assault. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily, their breath fogging in the cold air between them. "I've wanted to do that since the moment I saw you with that rifle," Owen admitted, helping her to her feet. "I've wanted to let you," she confessed, "but I've been afraid." His gloved hand cupped her cheek. "Of what?" "Of wanting something I can't have." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. A normal life, a family, understanding softened his features. "Ellie," he said, using her familiar name for the first time, "whatever life we might build together would never be normal, it would be extraordinary. As for family, there are many ways to make one." The sincerity in his voice unleashed something she'd held tightly bound for years. Tears slipped down her cheeks, instantly freezing in the bitter cold. "We should get back," Owen said gently, taking her hand. "This conversation deserves a warmer setting." The blizzard that descended that night was the worst of the season, forcing all 4 inhabitants to remain within the main house. Henry observed the change between his daughter and Owen with quiet approval, while Jack tactfully occupied himself with maintenance tasks that kept him mostly in the kitchen. Seated before the fire after dinner, Ellie found the courage to ask the question that had been troubling her. "If what I feared is true, if I can't have children, would that matter to you?" Owen considered her question with the seriousness it deserved. "I won't pretend I haven't thought about having children someday. But Ellie, I want you more than I want some abstract future with hypothetical children." "But no," he interrupted gently. "Listen to me. First, we don't know if what happened to your mother will happen to you. Second, there are children in this world who need homes and love. And third, most importantly, I love you, Eleanor Zimmerman. I love your strength, your intelligence, your compassion. Everything else is secondary." The declaration hung in the air between them, momentous and irrevocable. "You love me," she whispered. "With everything I am," he confirmed. "I think I have since that first day when you refused to look away first." Ellie's heart felt too large for her chest. "I love you too," she admitted, the words both terrifying and liberating, "but I'm afraid to hope." Owen took her hands in his. "Then hope with me, together." Spring came to Montana with its usual abruptness, transforming the snow-covered landscape into vibrant green almost overnight. With Henry's blessing, Owen had begun courting Ellie properly, though their relationship had already progressed well beyond traditional courtship. As April yielded to May, Ellie found herself facing an unexpected reality. She was to marry Owen Miller in June, with the entire town of Pinewood Creek in attendance. The same community that had whispered about her deficiency for years now watched in fascination as the confirmed spinster prepared for her wedding. Mrs. Thornton had appointed herself unofficial wedding coordinator, a role Ellie tolerated with surprising grace. The older woman's enthusiasm was genuine, if occasionally overwhelming. "Have you considered what you'll do about the ranch after the wedding?" Mrs. Thornton asked during a fitting for Ellie's wedding dress. "Surely Mr. Miller will want his own place eventually." "Actually," Ellie replied calmly, "we'll be staying here. Pa needs us, and Owen has grown to love the land as much as I do." The week before the wedding, an unexpected visitor arrived at the ranch. Sheriff Burke rode up to the house midday, a telegram in hand and an unusually serious expression on his face. "Need to speak with Owen Miller," he announced when Ellie greeted him. "Privately, if possible." Owen was summoned from the barn, his face registering surprise at the sheriff's presence. "Something wrong, Sheriff?" "Got a wire from Boston," Burke said, handing over the telegram. "Someone's been looking for you." Ellie watched as Owen's expression transformed from confusion to shock as he read the message. "This can't be right," he murmured. "What is it?" she asked, concern mounting. Owen looked up, his eyes troubled. "My brother. The telegram says he's alive." The revelation unfolded gradually over cups of coffee at the kitchen table. Owen had believed his younger brother had died in the same fire that claimed their parents. The telegram indicated otherwise. Daniel Miller had survived and had been searching for his brother for years. "He's coming here," Owen said, still visibly shaken. "Should arrive on Thursday's train." "That's wonderful news," Ellie said, though uncertainty crept into her voice. "Isn't it?" Owen reached for her hand. "Of course it is, just unexpected. There's so much I need to tell you, Ellie, things about my past I thought were buried forever." That night, lying in her bed, Ellie fought against the fear that had suddenly reappeared. What if this brother's arrival changed everything? What if Owen's past reclaimed him, taking him away from Montana, away from her? Thursday arrived with unnerving speed. Ellie accompanied Owen to the train station, her stomach knotted with anxiety. The locomotive appeared on the horizon, belching black smoke into the clear blue sky, bringing with it an unknown future. "It'll be all right," Owen said, squeezing her hand as the train pulled into the station. Passengers disembarked, and then Ellie saw him, a younger version of Owen, with the same blue eyes but a leaner frame and more formal attire. The brothers stared at each other across the platform for a long moment before embracing with fierce emotion. "I thought you were dead," Owen said, his voice thick. "Likewise," Daniel replied, pulling back to examine his brother. "You look different, healthier." "This is Eleanor Zimmerman," Owen said, drawing Ellie forward. "My fiancée." Daniel's surprise was evident, but he recovered quickly, offering a polite bow. "Miss Zimmerman, a pleasure. I apologize for intruding on your wedding preparations." "Not at all," Ellie replied with more confidence than she felt. "We're delighted you're here in time for the ceremony." Over dinner at the ranch, Daniel shared the story of his survival and subsequent search for his brother. He had been away at school when the fire occurred, returning to find his family presumably dead and the family business in ruins. "When I finally sorted through Father's affairs, I discovered something unexpected," Daniel explained. "He wasn't destitute after all. The shipping company had indeed failed, but he had other investments, substantial ones that survived. You left Boston believing yourself penniless, but Owen, you're actually quite wealthy." The revelation landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of implication outward. Ellie felt her earlier fears resurface with painful clarity. With wealth and family connections restored, would Owen still want the life they'd planned in Montana? That changes nothing, Owen said firmly, as though reading her thoughts. His hand found hers under the table. My home is here now. My future is here. Later that night, when the brothers had retired to continue their conversation privately, Ellie slipped outside to the porch. The night was mild, stars emerging one by one in the darkening sky. The familiar landscape of the ranch spread before her, comforting in its constancy. The sound of the door opening behind her announced Owen's presence before his arms encircled her waist. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. "Just thinking," she replied, leaning back against him. She hesitated, then decided honesty was the only path forward. "About whether Boston might call you back, about whether a ranch in Montana is really enough when you could have so much more." Owen turned her gently to face him. "Ellie, look at me." His eyes were serious in the fading light. "What I have here, what we've built together, is everything I want. The money changes nothing except that we can fix the south barn roof without worrying about the expense." Relief washed through her, followed quickly by shame at her doubt. "I'm sorry, no apologies needed," he interrupted. "I understand, but I need you to understand something too." He took both her hands in his. "Before I came here, I was lost. Not just without family or fortune, but without purpose. You and this land gave me that. I won't leave it or you for anything." The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, as though Montana itself approved of the union. The small church was filled beyond capacity, with guests spilling out onto the porch and grounds. Daniel stood proudly as his brother's best man, while Ellie was attended by the schoolteacher, who had become an unlikely friend in recent months. When Ellie appeared at the church door on her father's arm, a collective murmur ran through the assembled crowd. Her dress, simple but elegant, complemented her natural beauty, enhanced by the happiness that radiated from within. Owen waited at the altar, his expression one of wonder and profound gratitude as she approached. The ceremony itself was brief but heartfelt. As they exchanged vows, Ellie felt the weight of years of loneliness and doubt finally lift from her shoulders. This man, this remarkable, kind, steadfast man, had chosen her, exactly as she was, with no guarantees of what their future might hold. The celebration afterward lasted well into the evening, with the entire town participating in the festivities. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit around the dance area, casting a golden glow over the gathering. "Mrs. Miller," Owen whispered as they swayed together beneath the stars. "Are you happy?" "Completely," she answered truthfully. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." Their life together began with the easy rhythm of people who already knew each other's habits and preferences. Daniel stayed for a month before returning to Boston, but with a promise to visit regularly and handle the financial aspects of Owen's inheritance from afar. Summer faded into autumn, and as the first anniversary of Owen's arrival at the ranch approached, Ellie began experiencing unusual fatigue and morning sickness. Fearing the worst, she kept her symptoms secret for weeks, until Owen finally confronted her. "You're ill," he stated one morning after finding her retching behind the house. "We're going to the doctor today." "No," she protested weakly, "it's nothing." His expression was firm. "It's not nothing, Ellie. I've noticed the changes for weeks now." The journey to town was tense, Ellie's mind racing with possibilities, none of them good. The doctor, a younger man who had replaced the previous physician only months before, examined her thoroughly while Owen waited anxiously outside. When the examination was complete, the doctor's expression was unreadable. "Mrs. Miller, I'd like to speak with both you and your husband together." Owen was summoned, his face pale with worry as he took Ellie's hand. "What is it? What's wrong?" The doctor smiled then, a warm, reassuring expression. "Nothing's wrong, Mr. Miller. Your wife is approximately 3 months pregnant. Congratulations to you both." The words seemed to hang in the air, incomprehensible at first. Ellie stared at the doctor in disbelief. "That's not possible." "My mother, the family history." Mrs. Miller, whatever you've been told about hereditary barrenness is simply not medically accurate, the doctor explained gently. Your mother's difficulties were her own, not something automatically passed to you. You're young, healthy, and from what I can determine, your pregnancy is progressing normally. Ellie turned to Owen, tears filling her eyes. A baby, she whispered. Our baby. The joy that transformed his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Our baby, he repeated, gathering her into his arms. The news spread quickly through Pinewood Creek, met with genuine delight from most quarters. Mrs. Thornton was particularly effusive, claiming partial credit for having brought the couple together in the first place. As winter settled once more over Montana, Ellie's body changed with the growth of new life within her. Owen became endearingly protective, though he knew better than to suggest she reduce her activities too drastically. One evening, as they sat before the fire in their home, Henry having moved to a smaller cabin on the property to give the young couple privacy, Owen placed his hand over the growing curve of Ellie's abdomen. I feel him moving, he said with wonder. He's strong like his mother. Or she's spirited like her father, Ellie countered with a smile. Owen's expression grew contemplative. You know, when I first arrived here, I heard the whispers about you in town, about how you'd never know what it was to hear a baby's cry. Ellie nodded, the memory no longer painful. People can be cruel. They can also be spectacularly wrong. His hand moved gently over her stomach. Do you know why I was so drawn to you from the beginning, my excellent rifle skills? She teased. He laughed softly. That too, but it was your eyes, Ellie. There was such strength in them, but also a kindness that you tried to hide. He paused, his expression growing more serious. I recognized something in you that I knew in myself, the fear of hoping for too much, of wanting things that seemed impossible. She covered his hand with her own. And now I know nothing is impossible, not for us. He leaned forward to kiss her gently. I love you, Eleanor Miller. I loved you when I thought we might never have children, and I love you now as we prepare to welcome this baby into the world. In early June, as wildflowers carpeted the Montana hillsides, Ellie's labor began. Despite her earlier confidence, fear gripped her as the pains intensified. What if her mother's fate was hers after all? Owen never left her side throughout the long ordeal, his medical training proving invaluable as he assisted the midwife. As dawn broke after a night of labor, their daughter entered the world with a lusty cry that echoed through the ranch house. She's perfect, the midwife announced, placing the red-faced, squalling infant on Ellie's chest. Exhausted but triumphant, Ellie gazed down at their child, counting fingers and toes with wonder. Hello, little one, she whispered. We've been waiting for you. Owen sat beside them on the bed, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. She's beautiful, just like her mother. As the baby's cries quieted to soft whimpers, Owen leaned close to Ellie's ear. They laughed that you'd never know a baby's cry, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, until this cowboy whispered, You've heard mine. Ellie turned to him, questioning. I was that baby once, he explained softly. Crying for love, for family, for home. You heard me, Ellie. You gave me all those things before we even knew this little one would join us. Understanding dawned in her eyes as she realized the profound truth of his words. They had created a family from the moment they found each other, their bond complete even before their daughter's arrival. I love you, she said simply. And I love you, he replied, both of you, always. As the morning sun streamed through the window, bathing the three of them in golden light, Ellie knew with absolute certainty that all the pain and doubt of her past had led her precisely where she was meant to be in this moment, with this man and their child between them. The whispers and judgments that had once wounded her so deeply seemed to belong to another lifetime entirely. Here, in the home they had built together on the Montana prairie, Eleanor and Owen Miller had found everything they once believed impossible: love, family, and the promise of a future limited only by the boundless sky above.